Hello and welcome back to another episode of Cambro Conversations. And today's conversation, we are talking about scary adult things. For those of you that are following closely on Instagram, you'll know that that is a recent BBC Scotland documentary. To talk about this, we are joined by the producer of the show, Duncan Cowles. Duncan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here virtually.
I think we've swapped roles, haven't we, Duncan? Because I had a 6-minute cameo in the show, and you were on the kind of interviewer side of the mic.
Aye, this is a bit of a first for me to be interviewed by someone that I've interviewed. But I think that's what's quite exciting about it, or for me anyway. It's like it's almost risky because, you know, what if you didn't like what I did with the TV show? Now's your chance to, you know,
ask some terrible questions.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel a little bit exposed suddenly, but I think you've got to be willing to do that. If you're filming other people, you've got to be willing to let them, you know, have their way with you as well.
Yeah, I think that sounds fair to me, Duncan. So you mentioned filming other people. That's something that you've done for a long period of time now. How did you get involved in that space? What was the journey like?
I suppose if you go all the way back, like to even when I was at high school, I kind of knew that I wanted to go into filmmaking of some sort, and decided to go to, it's originally Telford College in Edinburgh, to study TV production, and that's where you kind of learn over 2 years. It's like, I suppose, how to use the camera, like all the kind of technical stuff, and a bit about the industry and things like that. And after that, went to Edinburgh College of Art because I became specifically more interested in documentary and kind of working with real life, I suppose, rather than the fiction stuff, which I thought was quite fun, but just was far more interested in working with real people and speaking to them about their lives and the kind of unexpected, like you don't really ever know what you're going to get when you film someone or something. And that kind of lack of control I found quite appealing, or maybe potentially trying to control the uncontrollable at times. And yeah, went to Edinburgh College of Art, did 3 years there, kind of honing more my voice as a director and how I wanted to make films, and began to use a sort of personal approach and maybe an authored approach where I would put myself in the story with the camera and kind of make it a little bit more self-aware, which I felt was I like doing it that way, but it also felt a little bit more honest to show the kind of making of something as you were doing it. And yeah, ever since then, I mean, I graduated in 2013, so I've been kind of doing it ever since, mainly in short form, so short films for myself or companies or broadcasters, and taking those films around film festivals, some locally like Edinburgh or Glasgow, but also further afield, and traveling with my work and meeting other filmmakers and kind of building hopefully a bit of a reputation amongst, you know, at least the film industry community, and have moved, I suppose, a little bit more recently into doing a bit more TV work with Scary Adult Things, which is my first ever full TV series on BBC Scotland and BBC iPlayer, and I suppose it's longer than anything else I've done, being almost 6 hours. 3 hours in its 6 episodes sort of run. So yeah, and that's I suppose that's a bit of an overview without going into too much detail.
Every nook and cranny.
I mean, it's a few years of my life, so I could lose myself talking about any one part of it, but that's a sort of general who I am, man with a camera.
Yeah, I think that explains like why you were interested in doing the documentary side of things, what the kind of, I don't know, the qualification, the process is like to actually get to that stage. I wonder if that's maybe changed for even the kind of younger generation behind you, who maybe would they have had to go to college and achieve these qualifications to kind of play at your level?
Yeah, I think, I mean, even when I did it, there was a sort of awareness that there isn't one way of doing it. There's not like one clear route into into doing film, you could have left school, not bothered with college, and gone straight into trying to get yourself into like runner work, even, you know, and like working your way up the industry that way, or definitely doing the 2 years at college and then not bothering with, you know, I did the degree at art college, but plenty of people just went straight into work. And yeah, you could, I mean, I know people that have come into film with no education in it and are doing really well. And yeah, I think it's, I mean, I chose to go down that route probably because at school you sort of feel like that's what you're meant to do, you know, like your mates are going to uni and stuff, so you're like, right, film, uni, you know, like, but there's no right and wrong way of doing it, that's for sure.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that probably nowadays there's probably more scope for people, even like if you consider you graduated 2013 versus 2021, there's probably more scope to make films with maybe easier to access equipment. You've got a much more pronounced social media. Like 2013, I wasn't even on Instagram then, so I can only imagine the kind of scope for people to post things more nowadays. Although obviously not of the same quality as a documentary, but they could maybe cut their teeth in the same way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can do so much with phones now. I mean, I've done workshops with people and just we've used phones for simplicity just to get the kind of essentials. And yeah, people can film so much more now. I mean, like I didn't have an iPhone or anything back when I started. You kind of had to use these cameras and they were like standard definition and stuff. Like the phones now do better quality than the stuff that I trained on, you know.
Yep.
It wasn't that long ago. It's kind of frustrating sometimes, even with the equipment that I use just now, which is like, you know, broadcast standard equipment or whatever. But like the little GoPro that I've got sometimes annoyingly looks better quality than like the, you know, the big camera with all the lenses on it. And you're like, oh God, like just because it's newer and
yeah,
there's probably some computer chip in it that makes it look better. I don't know. So yeah.
So documentaries was where you started to find a bit more of a passion than, as you said, like kind of fictional storytelling content. Why scary adult things there then? Because that's obviously like you said, the longest piece of work that you've done, probably the biggest commission in terms of on the BBC. What was the driving factors behind talking about a topic like that?
I suppose it all started with like me having various insecurities about my own life, like the fact that I live at home with my parents at the age of 30, or when I came up with the idea, I was 28. So, yeah. But and I was like, well, I kind of want to do something about it, but at the same time, like, don't know, it just felt like he almost wanted to like own the insecurity or like take control of it by sort of shouting about it, if you get what I mean. So like by doing a bit of work that looked at it and the other insecurities, like so episode 4 being about video games, it's like, well, I play video games, but I sort of feel embarrassed to admit it. Like, why is that? Like, why should I be embarrassed to talk about something to people that I enjoy? Do you know, like you wouldn't be shy about your basketball hobby, so why would you be shy about playing Call of Duty or whatever it is? So I suppose there was a lot of these things, and initially actually some of the episodes were just standalone ideas that I had, and it was when I took a meeting with, or managed to get a meeting at the BBC about doing something, it was like I had all these different ideas literally on different bits of paper in front of me, and they quite liked it, but they were like, oh, why, how is it, maybe it's just like one idea and you investigate all these different things, because they're all kind of stuff, all these insecurities are all like things that affect loads of young people, so maybe you can go out and investigate these things. And it sort of developed from there, and it took months of meetings and rewriting treatments and episode plans of what we would look at.
Okay.
But that's kind of that was the sort of genesis of it. And yeah, I mean, it's been great. I mean, we did the pilot as well, happened a year before the rest of the show, so it was like, and we used the living at home one as an example, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out and find what other reasons people might have for staying at home beyond just financial. Like, is there health reasons? Is there do they just like having extra money to go on holiday? You know, what's going on out there? So yeah, I think that's it. Yeah,
you can kind of group them under the term millennial problems, and I've seen that on the promo stuff for Scary Adult Things online. That is like very much a case of a 6-part series addressing millennial problems of that kind of younger end of the millennials, that kind of 28 to 32 that you and I fall into, and understanding like where all these different issues lie, like what our thoughts are them. And it's funny that you say that it's like maybe like areas of insecurity that you've thought about. Were any of them like bigger insecurities than others? I suppose we can dive into each one in turn, but was there one in particular that you're like, right, I'm actually like, I suppose you've already called out living at home being like a big one?
Living at home was a big one, and that's probably why it was the first one we looked at. I would say, I mean, I can almost go through the side hustles was like maybe an insecurity about not having a pension, or not having, like, feeling like everyone else has multiple facets. And but then it was an insecurity. I always panic about not having a pension, and I have no idea if I should or not, because some people tell me that pensions are overrated, but I'm like, I don't know. I feel like sooner or later that's going to be a really big important thing that I'm going to need. But anyway, probably never be able to retire anyway. So yeah, with the alcohol episode, the insecurity was kind of I go out for meals, or you go out and there's maybe younger people there, and they're not drinking, and for some reason it just makes me feel like, oh God, like maybe I shouldn't be drinking. Maybe I'm older and I'm drinking more, and it's just something in my head just goes, oh no, maybe you should have a look at that. So there's that. Yeah, for the video games one, we've talked a bit about fitness. Fitness was maybe, I mean, I don't know if that was an insecurity or more of a worry of like, I see a lot of people posting and talking about fitness. I don't do a whole lot of exercise apart from going walking, and it was maybe a worry of like, well, I don't look unfit as such, but I don't kind of like, well, I don't know, I'm 30 now, things start going wrong in the body at 30, do you know what I mean? If not before, like your knees start backing in. And it was just like, okay, I don't know, maybe I should, if I don't look at this now, maybe it's going to be too late, kind of thing. And so how fit really am I? And I'm going to go and find out if I'm as fit as I should be, or if I'm more fit, maybe I'm all right, or, you know. And it doesn't really look at diet, and I think that's a big part of it that we don't look at, and that would be another insecurity of mine probably that I would look at in a different episode if I could, but but yeah.
And then the last episode was around feeling connected. What drove you to look in that area?
That felt like almost a bit of a conclusion to the other episodes, in that I'd been going around connecting with a lot of people, and it felt like I sort of wanted to do something on feeling connected. There was an original motivation there to do with loneliness that I remember when making the pilot, almost everyone I spoke to talked about some motivation to do with something they were doing in life being linked to loneliness. So they were doing X because they were feeling lonely, or they were doing this because they were feeling lonely. And I thought, God, lonely. And then I looked it up, and loneliness was like the #1 fear of young people today on this article. And I thought, well, how much of our lives are shaped around that motivation of feeling lonely? And the episode maybe veered a little bit away from that statistic as a starting point, although it is still in there. And I was kind of looking at like, well, how do people feel that live in remote places? How do people feel that live in seemingly connected places? What about people that just distance themselves a bit more from people and technology, you know, and just and kind of looking at those things. So yeah,
I think we do have a loneliness epidemic, though. That is genuinely absolutely the case. I know I had a previous podcast speaking about social skills with a gentleman in Canada called Rob Riker, and he was saying that there's a statistic that in America, when they're asked to put their emergency contact, the most common answer is that they can't give an answer. Now, that's not because nobody can give an answer. A lot of people can still give that, but the most common answer is 0, which is still frightening. And that maybe underlines the fact that we are alone in some ways, beyond maybe parents if we still have them, brothers, sisters if we have them as well. So I do think there's something in that. And I don't even think that's just a millennial problem. I think that's a societal problem. I think you'll find a lot of maybe older generation, maybe even the generation behind us, Duncan, that are feeling more alone than ever despite the connectivity that we have through our devices.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it does. It affects everyone, regardless of age, really. I think what was surprising was that some people maybe assume that it's something that comes later in life. You know, as older people, maybe there's less people around, and that's the people that feel lonely. But like, what was almost surprising was like, I was like, oh God, it's the number one fear of young people who are like, in a lot of cases, have loads of people around and have quite busy lives and yet feel really alone. I mean, I suppose that was quite like, it's quite a sad statistic as well, in a way, that's the state of affairs. And yeah, we're more connected than ever through technology, but potentially more alone, which is quite an interesting area. I mean, there's been other things I've seen on the TV that look at that whole debate as well, but yeah, I was keen to do something on it.
Yeah, I think for the purposes of the audience and just based on maybe knowing me better, we'll really well focus a little bit on health as wealth in the fitness episode. But before we do that, of the other 5, what was the biggest thing that you think you learned during the course of making those 5?
I think rather than it being a sort of specific, like one big takeaway, well, there was one big takeaway. It was that people are just, it was more of a feeling that I took away than a learning point. It was just this feeling like everyone was trying to just, you know, do like them, like everyone was sort of like in a positive way doing what they felt was right, and that people were generally good people doing what they felt was the right thing. And so it was quite a nice feeling that I came away with, having like connected with all these people. It was just like, yeah, you know what, we're all right, we're all just doing our thing, and a lot of us are maybe winging it a wee bit, but like that's all right too, do you know, like it doesn't really matter. And to worry less about what other people think, which is one of those things that society almost puts on us these days due to like the internet and social media and stuff. It's like you can't help but like look at other people and worry about what people might think of you, but actually, as best possible, it's good to try and not worry about that too much. So that was my sort of general vague kind of overall takeaway, which I think I talk about a wee bit in the end of the series as well. It's like this sort of feeling of like, don't know, we're all just doing our sort of weird thing. Do you know what I
mean? Yeah, as individuals, as long as we're happy with the course that we're on, you can understand that, whether that's living at home, drinking lots, not drinking at all, whether that's sharing fitness content where it's not sharing content, whether it's gaming for 3 hours a night or more, or whether it's thinking, oh, I'm too old for video games. There's lots of different themes within that. So regarding the Health is Wealth episode, first things first, you surprised yourself with your own fitness results from when you went to Hampden. Why were you surprised, and what was the kind of the outcome of those tests?
I was surprised because I do so little what I think of as exercise. So like, I don't go to the gym. Do you know what I mean? I don't do a huge amount of like rigorous exercise, or what I would, you know, I don't do weights. I don't do any of that sort of thing. I do walk a lot. So like, I'll go for a walk most days around the local area. But I wouldn't say when I do that, it feels particularly strenuous, or that I would even go as far as classifying as exercise. Do you know, like I don't walk fast. I just walk sort of normal-ish pace. So I was like, well, I probably won't be that fit because I, you know, like I don't run or anything, you know. But like, yeah, it turns out I was all right. I was kind of fitter than expected. So they put me on it's called a VO2 max test, which is basically they they measure all your different bits and bobs, like your height and all that sort of stuff, and then your lung capacity is like registered by blowing into this thing as fast as you can, or as hard as you can, for as long as you can. And then you get on the machine and you basically just run until you can't run anymore. And the whole time that you're doing it, they sort of gradually increase the altitude. So
the incline
and the speed. The incline and the speed are kind of gradually increasing. And to be honest with you, the first 10 minutes were great. I was like basically walking for the first 10, 11, maybe even 12 minutes. I wasn't even needing to break into a jog. But then the last little chunk just completely ruined you. Like all of a sudden I was, I'd been chatting for the first 10 minutes to the guy and everything, like trying to be funny on camera and cracking jokes and stuff. And then the last 3 minutes were like, oh no, okay, I'm going to have to focus. And, it was pretty rank. I stopped. I wasn't sick. So I feel like maybe I could have gone an extra 30 seconds, but I would have been sick everywhere. But I did manage to stop before that happened. And yeah, like the guy, Seamus, who did it, he sort of said like you'd be doing pretty well if you get to 15 minutes. Like most people wouldn't get. He's like, most people, you want to be above 12 minutes. He's like, it would be unusual like for people to get that much beyond 15. So I had that in my head and I could see the timer. And so there was a little bit of a like, right, if I can get to 15, then we're doing all right. So I think I got to like 15 minutes, 15 seconds or something, like, and then the sort of warm down, cool down period afterwards. And yeah, I was surprised. Like you said, it was 114% better than predicted. So, which confused me at first because I was like, how can you ever be more than 100? Like I didn't understand. Yeah. I thought 100% was the max, but I got what I meant once I looked at the thing. It's like basically 14% better than an average person for my age, height, weight and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was all right. I thought that was pretty good. And he was like, you must be doing more than you realize you're doing. So whether that's carrying all the equipment about for filming, your walking that you're doing, or just like built-in movement into the day, he was like, you must be, because it's
your non-formal. Yeah. It's your non-formal exercise that is on a high level. You and I were joking that the average UK step count's like 4,000 steps, and you were laughing like that would never happen unless it's like full edit mode, like you say, when you're sat going through everything. You are moving anyway. You go for your kind of, it's non-formal, but it's a formal walk in terms of you actively go out for a walk. But then outside of that, if you're filming, you're lugging that camera around. And I know what it was like when you were filming with me. You've got this massive rig and you're moving around upstairs, downstairs to different locations. And that will tax your body in some way. If not rigorously, you won't be like pouring with sweat and hunched over like you were when you did the CrossFit workout in the documentary. But there is an element of strain. So versus your average 30-year-old, unfortunately, the average 30-year-old in the UK is in absolutely shocking shape and really, really unhealthy. So it's good that you managed to be well ahead of that.
Yeah, well, a lot of my mates were joking. They were like, yeah, well, if you're, they were like, what's the average 30-year-old then? Because the average 30-year-old could be like really unfit. And I was like, well, you don't need to put a downer on. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've just had this great news that I'm fitter than expected. And they're all like, well, looking for ways to bring me down, and it's but I think it's yeah, I suppose it's good. I was worried, like when I was filming, apart from the actual filming, all I was doing was driving from shoot to shoot, so I didn't feel like I was doing any exercise at all, really, apart from like lifting stuff and that. Whereas normally, I would go out for a walk and I'd like, maybe if this was done in the middle of the summer, I'd be in with a chance. But because it was in the autumn, I thought like not, and definitely if it'd be done near Christmas, I'm like, there's no way, because like after I'd been in the edit suite making the series for a few weeks without any exercise, I'm like, surely I would be worse. But I think these things apparently also, like, if you look after your fitness in the summer, it's not like if you go a couple of weeks you're suddenly really unfit. I think these things to do with like lung capacity and all that, they do last a bit longer. So it's it's kind of important on a longer term, am I saying this right? Longer term sort of like fitness, rather than just, okay, so. You can't just run for 2 days and then smash the test out of the park. It's more of an average measurement, I think. So yeah.
So the kind of joke hashtag that we came up with for you was hashtag just walk, if you were to like be a fitness influencer sharing your content online. But genuinely, you do go out for regular walks, and that's probably served you to get a reasonable result in that test, rather than if you were much more sedentary, your levels would likely have been much worse.
I mean, a lot of that's like a mental health thing as well, rather like my reasons for going out to walk is like, you just need that break from being in the house, you know. And my walking route is not particularly exciting. It's mainly fields and a bit of woodland, do you know what I mean? But and houses. But if I was able to travel more at the moment, you know, I probably would go for more interesting walks as well, you know. I quite enjoy going up the odd hill, but you know, I don't know if that was maybe something I got into quite last summer a wee bit, like going up the odd hill, like Monroe's and stuff. But I don't make a song and dance about it now. I just sort of occasionally will do it, and manage to get up them and back. But I don't do any kind of formal training or anything.
Yeah, of course.
And I don't post about it. That was the thing, I suppose, with the episode. It's like a lot of people post about their fitness. Like I don't, but I do. If I take a decent photo on a walk, I'm like, oh yeah, I could post that. But I talk myself out of it before I do it. And that was why it was interesting for me to look at people as well that posted a lot about their fitness, and the reasons why, and maybe why also I sort of don't, or like, if you know what I mean, or like, why do I find it sort of, I probably overthink anything I post online, if you know what I mean. So
yeah, I can understand that. And I think from my perspective, I was surprised that you thought that fitness in our age group is really like a big focus, because if we look at the stats, the majority of the population, I think 67% are classed as overweight, 23% classed as obese. So for all maybe I'm posting quite a lot online about it, it doesn't seem like a lot of people are actioning that message in terms of moving more and being conscious of your calories and being healthy. So it surprised me that you thought that it was really, really prevalent. But again, social media does tend to reward, in terms of the algorithm, aesthetic, eye-catching photos, which if you're in the fitness influencing game, you should be good at. Adobe aside, hopefully you're not using too much of that as your Photoshop, but creating good quality photos that catch people's attention is rewarded by Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever platform you're on. So maybe you see more of it, despite the fact that it's still rare for people to be really into fitness.
Yeah, it could well be, you know, that my what do you call it, like your social media bubble, or like the sphere that you're in, I see a lot of folk posting runs, or that's what's coming up on my feed. It's like folk going jogging a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just feel like there's a lot of that gets shown to me when I turn the computer on. But yeah, you're right, like other people with different networks probably won't get as much of that. And maybe it's my own insecurities that I click on that, and then that's why it keeps coming up. It's because I'm actually clicking, you know, because that's all part of it as well, isn't it? It's like, you know, if you click on adverts or people talking about video games, then that's what will come up on your feed loads for the next few days, you know. So it's it's all dependent on the person these days as well, isn't it? What is it they call it, an echo chamber? Is that the word?
It is an echo chamber, you're absolutely right. So if, for example, like, it'll either show you stuff that you really agree with and like, or stuff that I don't want to use the word trigger, but it really attracts your attention and maybe like your gaze. So like if you're really strongly anti Donald Trump, it will show you some stuff about Donald Trump because it knows it will keep you on the app and it will get you to read it. And then it will also show you stuff that's really strongly against him because, again, that'll keep you on the app. So like a sensationalist story about how bad he is, but then it'll also show you like, oh, Donald's just done this and all his fans are saying this, and you're like furious looking at the app.
Yeah, I think that's it. I must have an echo chamber of insecurities. That's what I get presented with when I open social media. That's a good name for like a book or something. It's almost like Harry Potter in the echo chamber of insecurities. That's what it. Do you know what I mean? It sort of feels like it's got a bit of a ring to it. That,
Duncan Cowles and the echo chamber of insecurities. That's a smash hit just waiting. We'll get J.K. Rowling on the phone, see if she's up for it.
That's it. Need to get it trademarked.
You mentioned that you see a lot of that in your feed. You don't like, you and I weren't acquainted beforehand, but what was your expectation of meeting somebody like me that maybe posts lots and lots? Because like you say, you think it's a bit unusual. It's not something you would do yourself. What was your expectation meeting me face to face? I know we'd done some pre-work through Annie, who got in touch with me on Instagram.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd seen a bit of you chatting about the reasons why you do it, and I'd obviously been on your Instagram as well. I know you've got two, so it was more I'd been on your the one you use for fitness stuff, like your sort of professional one, if we call it that. Yeah. Your other one's quite professional as well, but you know what I mean. Your
the big one,
brand one. Is that what you would call it? I don't know. Yeah.
Brand one, yeah.
The one with more followers. Let's go with that. So I kind of was immediately, I'm sort of like, well, this person is different to me. Do you know what I mean? Like that, and so that's interesting from the get-go, because I don't necessarily want to go out and speak to like people if they're too similar to me. It's not as interesting, because there was an interview that was cut from the pilot, for example, and the feedback was they were so similar to me that it was like you'd find different people. You're like, yeah, fair enough. So that, first of all, was interesting. It's like, well, you know, here's a guy who posts about his fitness a lot, and that's obviously massively important to him. Do you know? And he's interested in that, and then things you talked about in the little Zoom interview that you'd done with the researcher. I think I was just like, wow, this guy's so different to me. I mean, you can see even visually just now, like I'm sat in my room, you know, I've got all this like clutter around me and stuff, and I just saw that like you're someone that's I guess like I felt a little bit more professional. I don't know, like it sort of, I was like, this guy has got his thing together. Like, he knows what he's doing. So there's that. At the same time, I try and go into like every interview with a sort of balanced, like open mind, like ready to be taken any direction. And I think that probably is what happened with us a little bit, because I was maybe a little bit skeptical, like, why would someone want to post so much about fitness? Like, it just seems so foreign to me to do that. Or maybe I would not do that. I mean, I barely post anything, let alone the fitness stuff. But then, like, I think the more time we spent together, I kind of got why you did it a bit more, and like kind of warmed to your general vibe quite a lot. Like, I think we were having quite a good time by the end of the filming, you know. And it's just like, yeah, he's just someone doing his thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so that links into the general theme that you kind of felt through the end of things. So I think around that, in terms of documentary style, when you're going into like the health is wealth episode, do you have a preset story arc that you're keen to create? Or do you just have a general topic in mind and you're waiting to see what Colin says, what Cameron says, what was it Ian that was in his living room doing Insanity?
Aye, Ian.
You wait and see what they say.
Yeah, we with each episode we had I guess we've got our starting point, and we've got our question when we're sort of planning the series, and I have a rough idea what I want to look at, but then we have a meeting as a team, like me and the producer and the execs, like we kind of, and the commissioner even, you know, we all kind of talked a lot about what kind of things do we want to look at, and why. And so for the fitness episode, for example, I want to speak to someone who's, would say they're sort of in the fitness influencing sphere, and we think about why. And then also it's like, okay, I want to also speak to someone who's maybe had their life completely changed by fitness, like Ian, who's had that kind of life-changing
weight loss
thing. Yeah. So we do think about that sort of stuff and developed it over the kind of research period quite a lot. And then and it changes, like it changes all the way up to even once you film, to be honest with you, a little bit. But you are planning it to a certain extent. I'm not keen to plan too much because I like the unexpected. Like,
yeah,
if it was up to me, I would probably just rock up with a camera and film whatever happened. Obviously, when you're making TV, you're not allowed to just completely do that. So there's a bit more planning involved. And like, you know, we had a couple of researchers sort of doing stuff like speaking to you on Zoom beforehand, where there's a few, I'd say, like relatively straightforward questions initially, just to kind of get a feel of someone and how they might be on camera and stuff. And that was all new for me. You know, I'm used to, like, I'll phone someone up and go and film them, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, like, something else will come from it, you know. So yeah, there is a bit of planning and goes in, and a little bit of an idea of what may happen. You're like, okay, we might speak to that person and they might say something like that, but you know, they might not. And a lot of times people don't say what you expect them to. And it's almost my preferred option, is like, because then it makes it more interesting to make the program. But yeah, so I suppose it's like, there's a bit of planning, some expectations, but at the same time, you go with the flow, and that's definitely some of the stuff that I enjoy the most, is the unexpected things that happen along the way.
Yeah, I know you and I spoke before, and you were saying that you tried not to get too immersed in the researchers' interviews with me or with others, because you didn't want to almost have a preconceived idea of what I was going to say to certain questions. Like you say, that idea of the unexpected.
Yeah,
I
think I didn't want to feel like I was sitting there hearing answers that I'd heard you say before, because it's actually weirdly distracting when that, because it does happen occasionally, because people have these people get asked the same questions a lot in some cases, so they have answers that they start, and if I've heard it before and they've said it before, it doesn't work well. And you see it I see it in parts of the program even. I'm like, yeah, that's that bit where they say that thing and they said that in the Zoom, and I don't want to feel like I'm sitting there also asking questions in the hope that you'll say exactly what you said in a Zoom. So although I did watch them, I did sort of try and keep myself a little bit removed from that process to stay fresh and stay, like, spontaneous and excited when I come and film. It's like, I'm going to ask questions that, you know, just pop into my head even, you know, and it's not going to be too I don't know, like, too stale. Yeah.
You had your little notebook when we were talking, and we've probably spoke for about 3.5 hours on camera in total, between my living room and your garage and the garage gym. So there was lots and lots of different questions I was asked. Some of them I've been asked on podcasts before, some of them I've been asked in, like, maybe Instagram Q&A, and then some were like completely new, but kind of curveballs. And I think that was where they were more likely to end up in the show, because you maybe hoped that I would say something that wasn't, like, scripted. And I guess I am quite clean cut, as you said, and I have quite well versed answers and well thought through things that I've maybe said before. Or equally, I like to think that some of the work that I've done on my self-development means that I can answer questions from somewhere within my brain that kind of stays true to me. And I guess when I was looking at the show afterwards, I wondered whether you maybe hoped for a fitness influencer that was more out of another box, that was maybe more of your loving, like, chasing the likes and chasing the sponsorship deals and chasing things. Would that have made a good episode if you'd been able to find an individual like that?
I think there was people we looked at that maybe were more in that line, but I don't think it was too important for me, like, if they were almost that. I think what I wanted to do with the show was almost break stereotypes a little bit as well, with your episodes and even the gaming episode as well. It was like your idea of what someone might be, and then when you film with them, you actually learn a bit more and you see that there's a different, it's like you're not maybe what someone might expect you to be like, or an influencer to be like. So hopefully we got that from your scene and from other contributors in the series.
Yeah, the messages that I've got, people were like, they were very pleased that I came across the way that I am on Instagram, the way that I am on the podcast. And I think there's nowhere to hide in the podcast either, because if I'm putting out an hour a week, it's kind of very hard to be that kind of social media perfectly glossed, finished veneer that a lot of fitness influencers are. And I was thinking like of the other people that you might have got that are maybe in the Scottish fitness space. And I think you would have got a radically different 6 minutes in terms of, if like asking them about why they do Instagram and whatnot, I wonder whether they would have had an answer that broke the stereotype or radically reinforced it in terms of, oh, I do it because it's great access to whatnot. And you joked to me about like, maybe I'll get sent some outdoor wear for doing my Just Walk and stuff like that. And I was asking you, well, does that provide value for your audience? Like, what's your driving factor behind that? Obviously, I like the fact that a lot of the costs of my fitness are covered through my protein and muscle food and access to gyms, but it's more of a byproduct for me. Whereas I guess there's a lot of online content creators that's their sole driver. And I thought, would that have made an interesting insight for you on the episode?
It's that thing where, like, I think if we'd had maybe a longer episode, if it was a 60-minute show instead of 28, we might have been able to fit in another, maybe someone else who'd been down that. It was maybe a more of an extreme character, if you would say that. But like, yeah, I don't know. I think it definitely, like, one of the things I like is that an audience maybe does go into thinking, oh, is this guy going to be all about the likes? Is he going to be sort of like potentially like shallow or whatever? Yeah. But actually, through watching it, what I think an audience will get is like, not that, it's like he's I think they'll really warm to you across or from what I've heard, people have done this as well. They've kind of really enjoyed then listening to you and spending that time. And then, like, especially when we're joking about like the thirst trap and stuff, it's like, it's sort of the space, but you're also like, you're quite self-aware about it as well, and that it maybe sometimes that sort of stuff sounds a bit ridiculous when it comes out your mouth, but it's like you're able to joke about it and laugh about it, but also your interests come across really well. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it is that stereotype challenging that works throughout the series. And if it was just more extreme characters, like, it might fall into being a different type of show that I wouldn't be as comfortable making, potentially.
Yeah, your comfortability with what you create is massive. Even for me on a small scale with a weekly podcast, not something that goes out on the BBC. I would want to be comfortable with what I've created. And again, that links into me maybe not falling into that extreme camp of influencer that will post whatever. One of the other bits of feedback that a lot of my audience was sharing with me was around the documentary delivery style and the kind of famous term deadpan dunk. Where does the style come from? Because although you're very matter of fact on this discussion, you maybe are more so when it's your own documentary that you're creating.
I think like it's just something that developed a bit over time, and even back to when I was at uni. I mean, people that know me as a person over the years have sort of they're relatively used to my mumbling delivery and sort of personality, and it's become just a part of the films that I make, almost unintentionally at first, through mistakes happening when filming and things like that, and then them ending up funnier than sometimes the film that I was making or whatever. And so it sort of just seeped into my work, and then I started just being comfortable with it being in there, enjoying an audience's response to it. Like, if they find it funny and more honest and stuff, like, they like seeing it. So it's quite hard to get away from as well when it's sort of your personality is like that. If I was to try and make films in a different way, they probably wouldn't work as well. I wouldn't feel as genuine. Like, I would probably struggle to make that super polished documentary that you maybe see on Netflix. Do you know? Like, I don't think I would be the right filmmaker for it. Whereas something a bit more homemade like this show, yeah, like that fits my strengths as a filmmaker, and my kind of, I suppose, the conversational approach as well, like to just chat to people, meeting people, and I want the audience to feel like they're really there with me on the journey, whether things are going right or wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas when you watch a Netflix polished documentary, you don't often notice there's the filmmaker. You're aware there's a director somewhere and all the rest of it, but you don't necessarily always feel their presence. And I'm keen to make authored work that, like, that has me a part of it. Going to art college as well, there's very much that encouraged approach of like, your work should be almost an extension of you. So that's the way I like to do it. Yeah,
you could see that throughout it though, I think. And you were saying that sometimes your editor would give you feedback based on how you were that day. Would you be able to share that with the audience a little bit?
My editor Erica, who did a cracking job overall. Like, I struggled to have made what we made without her. She was almost directing it with me at points, it felt, in the edit suite. And she was good at, like, because I was doing so many shoots back to back. I was like filming with you one day, film with someone else the next day, and you barely have time to process what you've just filmed before you're filming the next thing. Even though you've prepared for it for a few weeks, you're still like, it's a lot. And obviously some days, like in every other part of life, you'll be better and more on the ball and more switched on and more like, I don't know, peak performance. Would that be the right? You're just on it. Other days, things would just go wrong, and maybe one thing would set you off. Maybe you're tired, but like the shoot just wasn't as good. Like, it just didn't go as well. The contributor was maybe doing all the right things, but it was probably me that was just forgetting to, like, there was numerous things, like I forgot to press record on my mic on one shoot, for example. Yeah. Everything else was fine. Just my radio mic, I thought I'd pressed it and I hadn't, for example. Realized 15 minutes in the interview. But like, one thing like that isn't a big deal. You can sort it out. And it doesn't happen very often, but something like that will then set you off. And next thing you know, you're gashing your hand on the petrol pump on the way home, like happened on one of the shoots. And and you're probably just tired because it's a lot to do. But I would know myself, but also my editor would be like, oh, you were on the ball that day. Because she would get all the footage. And she's like, oh, you were being really funny that day. And like, that day, I don't know what was going wrong, like, and it's quite funny I know, hopefully, like, you don't notice when you watch the show. Hopefully it all is decent. But I know what shoots I could have done better at and what shoots went well. I think yours, for example, went really well. That was one I was always really happy
sharp. Yeah, you were sharp, whereas I think you said to me that there was some where you're more tired and you almost were quieter, which...
you're sort of, because there's like sort of I mean, that might also work better for certain contributors at times, but like, for example, I think the CrossFit day was another one where my editor was like, oh, you were on it that day, like you were saying all the right things, and it was just, everything just sort of clicked. But yeah, there was other shoots, I'm not going to say which ones, because it feels like a shame to but I know which ones I'm like, I could have done better. But you don't have even time to be annoyed. You just put you on to the next shoot. And they were all good enough that they work. And you're always your own worst critic as well. Well, and my editor is my worst critic. Just because she knows me and the footage so well, she can tell me really bluntly whether I was on the ball or not, which is good. I mean, it's one of the reasons I like working with her, is we are so comfortable with each other's presence that she can slag me off and it's productive.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me, Duncan. It'd be remiss of me not to ask you what some of the challenges and experiences were like filming during a global pandemic, filming during COVID, what were the key ones, and what was different about maybe this production from anything else you've worked on because of it?
Yeah, I mean, that was a massive thing that I've almost taken for granted. Like, I've almost forgotten about it in a weird sort of way, because you just get so used to that problem being an overarching thing for the whole series. Like, it got commissioned, I think we'd done the pilot without restrictions, I suppose. I should make that clear. Like, it's, I mean, there's a bit where I shake someone's hand in it, so you would jump out your skin if you didn't know it was 2019. But the rest was commissioned like, yeah, about a week before lockdown or something. We're like, oh, great. So we managed to sort of get around it by, well, we had to wait a long time before you could actually get out and about. So we used that time as productively as possible doing the research, like when we spoke to yourself. And that all worked all right. That was kind of fine. It was like remote working, like a lot of people would be doing. And then when it came to shooting, it was like, well, I'm used to filming on my own anyway, so that wasn't necessarily a big problem. It was like, it's going to be low risk because it's like Duncan with his camera, unless it's a really complicated shoot, in which case researcher will be there, and it's outdoors. Maybe, you know, it's like we'll try and, so we had a few shoots where, like the CrossFit one, where Fran, the researcher, working during the show, she was there with the camera and helping out a bit, because I was too involved to film and lift weights or whatever. So we did as much as we could to restrict, to reduce the risk of anything happening. And then obviously I had to keep 2 meters at a minimum, if not more, most of the time, just to be distant from people. And that, again, like, it sort of sounds like a faff, but actually it wasn't, because you wouldn't really get closer than 2 meters when filming anyway in normal times. Like, otherwise you'd be really in someone's face, do you know? Yeah. So like when we did the interview, we were 2 meters, but we probably would have been about the same distance anyway. And you can see in the pilot, there's proof of that, because like some of the interviews I've done in the pilot, I'm sitting like 2 or 3 meters away from the person, and it almost looks like we're social distancing, but we weren't, because it was done in 2019 when that wasn't a thing. So it sort of shows that that side of things was okay and relatively unaffected. There was other stuff, like obviously I'm cleaning the equipment every night, wiping it down, wiping the radio mics before they're given. That was one thing that was like, okay, what are the touch points between you and a contributor? It's like, well, the radio mics, almost the only one really. So that was all done carefully with wiping them down and stuff like that, and just being sensible about it. Do you know what I mean? I think, like, I mean, I've got all sorts of PPE gear in the car still. The main one I used was the wipes, to be honest with you, but there's like sprays as well that I had, and like yeah, there's this plastic helmet thing that I never wore, just because I can't, still not sure what I would have needed that for. But because I was on camera, I was able to also be like unmasked for a lot of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, I think it, hopefully when you watch it, you don't really feel like that coronavirus is drawn attention to. You could, if you could scrutinize it and go, okay, he's clearly taken all the precautions. There's nothing in here that's problematic. He's obviously followed the restrictions. However, at the same time, I don't want people to be thinking about that as they're watching it. Do you know?
Yeah, of course.
You want it to be a kind of break from all that stuff.
You want people you want people to watch it in 2-3 years' time and not think, oh, that's a COVID documentary that was created during 2020, which I'd like to say, based on like sitting apart during interviews as you would. And I'm no camera expert, and I don't think many of the people that watch television are. They would probably say, all right, okay, well, that was filmed as you would, regardless of whether Duncan had to be 2 meters back.
That's it. I think the one thing actually that makes it, that draws attention to it more, is the behind the scenes photographs. So, well, or the production stills that say we took. Like, there was like, you had to be 2 meters apart, and actually that was a bit more fiddly, and sometimes looks a bit awkward. You know, because you're 2 meters apart. Although weirdly, it works really well for like promotional stuff, because you can like, you've got 2 meters between the people in the photographs, so you can put the logo of the program in the middle really nicely. So weirdly, quite nice things can happen at the same time. But yeah, it's there was some things in, say, the alcohol episode that were a bit, that did change the shape of it, because the original plan for that is like, oh well, you'll go on a night out with someone who likes to drink a lot, and obviously you can't really go on a night out. We managed to film that while pubs and stuff were still open, but obviously we had to book an entire function room to have a night out between me and one other person, which felt a little staged. And I don't mind the way it ended up feeling in the program. I think it works quite well. But you know, the original plan was like, oh, you'll go out on a night out, go around some bars, like, you know, all that sort of stuff. And obviously you just couldn't do that. So that episode probably changed the most. The rest I felt like were reasonably unaffected. Maybe the CrossFit episode, the CrossFit sequence, for example, maybe there would have been other people in that, because that's quite a group. There's a big community element to CrossFit, so there might have been other people in the gym. But again, I don't mind the way it felt when it was just me and the contributor. Maybe it even benefited it in a sort of strange way, because it just focuses you so much on the kind of dynamic between me and the contributor. Do you know?
Yeah, that makes, I can completely understand all of that, Duncan. I guess the last thing for me to ask you before we ask where to connect with you would be, would you have done anything differently on reflection? Now that you've watched the finished product, what would you do differently?
That's a good question. I'm sure there's loads of things that I said during the editing process to my editor that I would have done differently in retrospect, and I've weirdly forgotten most of them, because I'm kind of happy with the finished product. So like, you sort of forget all the regrets. But there was definitely stuff going along. I'm like, oh, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd filmed that shot better. Every shoot had a whole range of things. Like, oh, I wish I'd just shut the blinds in that guy's house because the light is changing so much and stuff. But you edit it and deal with it so much that by the time it gets to the finished program, you've forgotten about that, because you probably didn't use the shot that you want to be better, for example, so it's not in there. There's like silly stuff, like I think the shot of Hamden that I did from the outside, like I wish I'd used a tripod, like, but I didn't, because I was in a rush and I just did it handheld and it's a bit shaky and it annoys me. There's a few things like that. Overall though, you almost can't focus too much on like, oh, I would have done that, because it's sort of is what it is, and it's quite fast paced, so you just have to accept the choices you made. I should almost ring up like Erica, the editor, and be like, so what were all those things that I moaned about in the edit suite, or what are all the things that she moaned about, like that I could have synced the cameras up better, or you know, things to make her life a little bit smoother. But no, I mean
production based then, rather than like what you've actually created in terms of the message and the content.
I think so, yeah. I think I'm reasonably happy with everything else. Yeah, I don't know. I could do. I remember something. It's weird because I'm not like, although I'm promoting the show quite a lot at the moment, and I'm doing, weirdly, I'm not really watching it. You know, it's been a while since I've now, like, I watched it so intensely for so long that I was the most fed up of seeing myself and hearing my voice that I've ever been in my life. I'm like, oh my God, like, how do people deal with, like, you know, I was just not enjoying watching my own program by then. So I've not really like, I've looked at the production stills and the promotional stuff around it more than I have the anything else. So I kind of like, I've sort of conveniently forgotten about the things I probably would have changed. Going into doing, say there was another series, I suppose maybe that's an easier way to look at it.
Yep.
If there was another series, there's a bunch of stuff I would feel like we'd probably do slightly better, just in terms of like knowing what a lot of the people involved in it. It was the first time we'd all made a 6-part documentary series, so it was like a learning experience at the same time. So there's things, some of it technical, some of it just maybe having an extra day off each week just so that I'm not as tired for some. Yeah, like it was tough, like 8 weeks of pretty much 6-day weeks shooting and traveling around, and then it was like straight into the edit. The edit started while I was still shooting, you know, and it all worked and we got there. But like, I feel like you could always use more time, but that's a budget thing as well. So can't necessarily guarantee that I would be able to have more time in the future. But that's the one thing I wish we'd had more of, kind of the whole way through. It's like, with an extra day we could have done that, or I could have maybe written the voiceover a bit better if I'd had an extra day to work on that. And there's all these sorts of things. But I think that was the biggest learning curve, going from, say, short film to TV. Like short film, I sometimes spend about a year making a short film, perfecting every little bit of it, you know, and it's like rock solid when I put it out. A TV series, it's like you just don't get like the time. You have to keep moving and you have to keep doing it. And I think there's loads of nice things around that as well. Like there's lots to be benefited from just accepting, like, okay, that's it now, we have to move on. But also there's other things where you're like, I could have probably thought of a funnier joke for the voiceover there, or, you know, a better stat. I could have probably found a better stat if I'd had an extra day of looking for the right stat. You know, there's always going to be stuff like that. But luckily, the response has been really positive and people are really enjoying it. If they're not enjoying it, they're not telling me. So that's good.
Overall, it's really refreshing that you're happy with what you've poured a lot of your life into, what you've created, what is probably the kind of peak at the moment in terms of the things that you put out there. For those that want to check out the episode, obviously I'll link it in the show notes below to check out the series on BBC iPlayer. But if they wanted to give you some feedback, Duncan, good, bad, indifferent, of course, where would be the best place for them to do that?
So yeah, it's always nice to get feedback from people. Basically just at Duncan Cowles. So like at my name, Duncan Cowles, on Twitter or Instagram is probably the easiest place. If they really want, they can email me. My email's on my website. It's basically just Duncan at duncancowles.com. It's all like dead easy. I think the biggest problem people have is spelling Cowles wrong.
I'll link it all in the show notes, Duncan. Don't you?
Because my name will be in the thing. So just at Duncan Cowles wherever you want. I mean, like in general, all the platforms, I'm probably on them, whether I'm using them or not, at Duncan Cowles. So I'm dead easy to find. There's no one else with my name yet that I've discovered in the world. So it's great from a putting something out there point of view, because it's so easy to say. People just, if you just look up my name, it's all there. So yeah.
A unique man indeed. So I hope everyone has enjoyed listening back to understanding a bit more about Scary Adult Things, the small role that I played within it, Duncan's methodology, his lessons that he learned throughout it, and understanding a bit more about what it meant to create a film and create a series during a global pandemic. If you have enjoyed this, please take a screenshot, pop it on your Instagram story, tag me at call.cambro, fire some feedback my way, and I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.